Let's go back in time to 1932 as Converse brings you historic footage of the legendary original Celtics, with whom all great professional teams are compared.
We have now taken over your radio.
Richie Guerin is about to show you the most important step in getting past a man. It's the first one.
And Oscar will inbound it. The men in green, the Milwaukee Bucks, that's Alcindor against Bellamy.
Has Jordan, Allen shakes free, gets two!
Gilmore
Stop! Brother!
lead Toledo artists, you get 21.
4:28 to go in the first quarter for the Cow Palace. Here's Barry.
Jordan, open, Chicago with the lead!
Hello, and welcome back to the Over and Back Classic NBA podcast at thepodiumgame.com. I'm Jason Mann, and I'm back here with my co-host, Rich Craich. Rich, great to be back with you.
Yes, this is it's going to be a bad episode. Not in terms of us being bad,
right.
But what we're going to talk about is going to be bad.
It is.
We'll be mediocre.
I mean, at best, we hope we aspire for mediocrity, and if we can reach it, then we're very happy. So
okay, we'll be 6 seeds in this topic that we're talking about. So.
That's fair. Yeah, this is our 20th show.
Is it really? I was not keeping count. That
yeah,
very cool.
I just counted before we started. This is our 20th show, so
I had expected it like 11, but
yeah, there you go.
That was what I was like. We'd get bored of it.
Yeah,
no one's gonna care. No one's gonna listen, but people cared. People listen, so it's pretty cool.
People are happy. So I'm glad that you had such high expectations when we first started doing the show. That definitely appreciate that. Anyway, yes. So we were talking about the some of the worst playoff teams. We kind of picked per decade ish. We fudged that a little bit because of just because we did. So we just kind of wanted to go through. We are in the midst of a very bad playoff race, which we'll get into a little bit at the end of the show. But the last two teams that are going to represent the Eastern Conference in this year's playoffs, their winning percentages are not looking good.
No, I actually, honestly, and I've sort of looked at it from afar, but when I looked at that link again, just to kind of do research for this, I went, man, the Brooklyn Nets are like a pretty much good lock to make the playoffs. Like they're not a good team.
No,
and they're having a particularly bad year too. And it's just such a desolate franchise right now. They, at the trade deadline, they're trading off Pete, and then still, no, they're a 7th seed. They're not even the worst team. They're like the second worst team. It's
yeah. I mean,
I saw an email. Somebody tweeted out emails. The Boston Celtics, they were taking pre-orders on playoff tickets, and I'm like, my God, that's like a team like Danny Ainge's like, come on. I'm like, I'm trying to lose, and could you guys please?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they've been weird because then they got Isaiah Thomas and they are trying to win. Yeah. I thought the Nets were done a couple weeks ago. I mean, they lost a bunch and then they ended up winning 5 or 6 in a row. And
that's all it takes.
Being a Hawks fan, for me, we get their pick no matter what. We're swapping their pick. So if they finished, if they finished outside the playoffs, there's whatever chance, however slight, that they could,
someone must have told somebody.
Lottery. Yeah. So so now it looks like they're gonna make the playoffs. So I'm frustrated. But anyway, we'll get to that at the end. But we're gonna go way back. We're gonna go back first to the year is 1953, and things are happening. Eisenhower's president. The Red Scare is sweeping the nation.
We should start every podcast with whatever time it is. Then we just throw 13 pop
flappers
culture,
are dancing in the streets. Wait, no, I don't think that's the 50s.
No, I mean, well, maybe. I mean, probably still. I mean, there may have been a flapper. Some street somewhere.
There was probably a flapper somewhere. Anyway, so the National Basketball Association is in its infancy, and the Baltimore Bullets, the original Bullets, were at a rousing 16-54, making the playoffs. This was a 10-team league. It had been a 17-team league as recently as 1950. So 3 years later, they're down to 10 teams. They would eventually get down to 8. In fact, the Bullets themselves would fold in another 2 years. So out of those 10 teams, 8 made the playoffs. When you have that ratio, you're going to have.
There's a good chance a 15 or a 16 team win team is going to go in. Since you're a big trivia guy, aka plug your recent appearance, and then I have a trivia question for you.
Sure. Yeah, I was on the NBA History Challenge on the Pro Basketball Chronicle, which is a relatively new NBA history focused podcast. I guess in theory,
We hate that because the direct competition.
It's
So.
a theory a competitor, but they seem like nice guys and have a fun show. So I recommend they check it out. Yeah, then they have a little YouTube show. It's also available on their podcast where they bring somebody in to answer some NBA trivia questions. So I took the challenge. I was the first to ever take the All-Star, the hardest level, and I think I did fairly well. I'm not going to reveal.
You did very well.
I'm not going to spoil it. Let people check it out and see if they can, if they want to check it out. It's only like 5 minutes, so if you have some time, it's on the Over and Back Facebook page. You can also check out their podcast as well. So it's a good thing. But what
quickly, yes. Yeah. Can you name the 17 NBA teams in 1950?
Oh, not off the top of my head, no. I could name a few, like the Chicago Stags. There's Sheboygan Redskins.
No.
Washington Capitals.
Washington Capitals, yes.
The Chicago Stags weren't there by then.
No, I thought so too. That's when I initially.
Yeah, they must have been before. I'm not gonna.
All right, well, here really quick: Philadelphia Warriors, Boston Celtics, New York Knicks, Syracuse Nationals, Baltimore Bullets, Washington Capitals. Western Division is a hodgepodge of the Minneapolis Lakers are the Rochester Royals, the Fort Wayne Pistons, and then the two that I don't think anybody would probably have guessed: the Indianapolis Olympians and the Tri-Cities Blackhawks.
That's right. The Tri-Cities Blackhawks eventually became the Atlanta Hawks.
Right, correct.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah.
Well, that was it.
It was good. That was good. So the Bullets, they lost to a 47-win Knicks team that I believe made the finals that year. The Knicks actually made the finals 3 years in a row in the 50s and lost each time, which I discovered today as I was looking up some of this history. I didn't realize they had made quite that many finals appearances during the 50s. So the Bullets were not particularly remarkable, but they did have Don Barksdale, who was a future Hall of Famer. He was the first African-American player to be a college All-American. He was the first also to make the U.S. men's Olympiad basketball team. And the first black player to be in the All-Star game. So it's definitely a historic, a very good player. Also, they had Fred Scolari, who had formerly been their coach, and his nicknames were Blubber and Fat Freddy, which sounds pretty great. He was also traded to the Fort Wayne Pistons. He was an All-Star this season, but was traded to the Fort Wayne Pistons a month later. So he did not actually participate in the playoff squad itself, just was on the team during the season. And then Paul Hoffman, who was the only holdover from they actually won the NBA title in 1948 and was the only holdover from that team 6 years later. And he had two separate retirements because of a heart condition.
Because he kept coming back.
That was notable, yes.
He couldn't go away.
Yeah.
I'm good. All right, I'm ready.
Yeah, I don't know anything. I hate to make fun of somebody for a heart condition. I'm not trying to do that, but it's just sort of remarkable to do that. And they were coached by the immortal Claire B, which is a great name. You would think it'd be a woman's name. I guess Claire may have been one of those names like Leslie that used to be more of a man's name and then became a woman's name. And I found an SI Vault article about it was about many things, but it included a tidbit about Claire B. Right before the 54 season, when they would play like 11 games and then would fold, he wrote to friends across the country in the hopes that they could find some hidden talent that would go to Baltimore. And then one of his friends, he received this reply, and I quote, "I have no one on my team who could help you. I have no one on my team who can help me. I have no one on my team who can help themselves, let alone anyone else. I do know of someone who can help you. Get down on your knees, brother, and pray."
So
not much else. I don't think I would be talking to that friend again. No. So anything else on the Baltimore Bullets?
No, I can't say I've seen too much or know a whole lot about this particular Baltimore Bullets team, but that's 16 wins is pretty remarkable, and that's one of the themes of a lot of these teams are sort of a league in flux in one way or another. Not necessarily in flux, but expansion teams, an expansion year, a year where there's too many playoff spots and not enough teams, or just something like that. That's sort of a theme that you kind of catch with a lot of these years where it really stands out. And this one in particular, like you said, 8 out of 10, you're gonna get. I would love to know. Those other teams that didn't make it, man, you're like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, they were.
When the team that wins 16 is one of the ones that goes in. Like those two that didn't make it are like, yeah, you guys are. guys need some help.
Well,
but
part of it was division. So,
okay.
So they would have been ahead of one team, division. Yeah, they were ahead of the 12-win Warriors. But in the other side, the 27-win Milwaukee Hawks were screwed out of the playoffs. You know, with those 27-44 record. You know, so yes, so it wasn't quite that bad, but yeah, there are a couple of times in this where, particularly in the early 70s, when they went to conferences and some of like the divisional stuff. Like I think it was like the top two teams from each division for a while. So there was some really bad omissions for the first couple of years of that before they kind of added teams and then changed the rules around. There's some notable like teams with like high 30s going over teams with like high 40s records type stuff. Yeah. So
they actually didn't do that bad in the playoffs. I know I want to look this up for every one of these teams just to kind of see how they did. They lost the first game 62-80, so that wasn't good. But the second game 90-81 against the Knicks. That's not bad.
Not terrible. No. I mean, yeah, they compared to some other teams in this that we're going to talk about, they did not perform that poorly in the playoffs.
No, they did okay.
Yeah. So go Bullets. So the next team is the 1959-1960 Lakers. They were 25-50. I should mention they had a negative 4.41 simple rating system. I think I forgot to mention the Bullets had a negative 5.8, which is the worst of any of the teams that I could find that made the playoffs. Yeah, and I'm sure most people listening to this know this, but I'm just going to say it anyway. That is sort of a it's like point differential, but also like adjusted for basically strength of schedule. So it's a better indication than win-loss record of how you perform during this season, in theory. So
a negative 5.8 is bad.
Yeah, that is bad. That would be like probably like a 20-win team or so in the NBA. Probably even worse than that. 15 to 20-win team. That would be not historically bad performance, but definitely bad. So. So the 60 Lakers, it was their last year in Minneapolis. This was 6 teams making the playoffs in an 8-team league, which is basically the entire time between 54 and 67. 6 teams made it in an 8-team league. Eventually 9 teams once the Bullets were added. The new Bullets, not the old Bullets, and this was the second year for Elgin Baylor. They actually, the previous season, they had won only 33 games, but they had actually upset the Hawks, who were the defending champions, and made the finals, losing to the Pistons. So that was kind of weird, but interesting. And of course, Elgin Baylor, everyone knew immediately that he was awesome. They also had Hot Rod Hundley, who was a noted goofball and later a famous announcer. Played for West Virginia before Jerry West did. Was a star there. Rudy LaRusso, who was a longtime Laker in the 60s. Slick Leonard, who was a 50s to early 60s NBA player, and then later famously a Pacers coach for 70s and 80s. And then Frank Selvey, who was famous for played for Lakers and I think a bunch of other teams, and famously missed what would have been a game-winning shot in the 62 finals that would have beaten Boston that year. So they also had Larry Faust, who was a 8-time All-Star in the 50s, but was at the end of his career and was traded to St. Louis during the midseason. So they actually did okay in the playoffs. They beat a 30-win Pistons team in the first round, but then took the 46-win Hawks to 7 games. So the Hawks and Lakers had some tough series in the Western Division back in the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's as you said, it's 6 teams out of 8 made it. The two that didn't make it, the Cincinnati Royals, 19-56. They probably did not deserve to. The New York Knicks, though, unfortunately got kind of messed up by the Eastern Division. They 27-48. Not that they were any better, but they were on the outside looking in. But the East was a powerhouse right then. You have 59-win Boston Celtics, 49-win Philadelphia Warriors, and a 45-win Syracuse Nationals. So yeah, good on the East.
Yeah,
so
go Nats.
See. It wasn't always that way.
No.
It wasn't always this way.
Yeah, exactly. So there's an SI Vault, which is actually from the preseason, but I thought was funny. It talked about Minneapolis was not drawing well. They were trying to find ways of bringing in crowds. So they were able to talk Elgin Baylor out of taking his final year of college. And signing with Minneapolis, and they also hired basically like a marketing guy to do things to lure fans to the games. One thing they did was organizing the Lakerettes, who were a cheerleading group. So I guess it's sort of the forerunner of the Laker girls. So that was not Jerry Buss's idea after all. At least, he wasn't the first to do it anyway. And they also had season ticket holders escorted their seats by models wearing cocktail gowns. And they also had a German beer garden complete with an Oompa band was set up after one game. So there you go. It didn't really work out.
I'm into the German beer garden.
Yeah. I mean, I like a little.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I like a little Oompa band.
That sounds cool in the '60s. Like that's pretty progressive in the '60s, right?
Well, it's Minneapolis, So
yeah.
So yeah, so not so good, but obviously they would get Jerry West the next season, and they would be pretty good for a while.
Yes, the Los Angeles Lakers turned into it. They turned out all right.
Yeah, they did.
Minneapolis.
Right, yeah.
They were not long for the land of a thousand lakes, unfortunately.
No, but things worked out fairly well for them in Los Angeles, if I recall.
From what I've read, yeah,
pretty much.
We'll find out. I'm sure we'll find out later.
We probably will.
I don't know.
Probably will. At some point, we'll look at it. We'll talk. So our next choice is the 67-68 Bulls, who won 29 games and had a negative 3.76 SRS. They'd actually previously in 67 had also accomplished nearly the same record in SRS. They were slightly worse this year comparatively. They were the previous year was 8 playoff teams in a 10-team league. They added 2 teams, so it was 8 out of 12 in 68. They had Bob Boozer in his only All-Star year. They had Jerry Sloan, who was basically the only player on this squad who would remain on the stout early 70s Bulls teams that actually were really good. They won like 50 games 5 or 6 years in a row. I think that I once figured out that they had the longest streak of 50-win seasons without making the finals.
I believe that's true. Yeah, I'm almost positive I've read that prior or whatever. Yeah, they were really good. I mean, people forget them because obviously they didn't have really like crazy long playoff runs, didn't make an NBA Finals. But it's a really, really good team. A really good, kind of a mini, not a dynasty. You can't really say a dynasty in that sense, but consistent. Yeah,
sort of team they were a fun bunch and a tough-minded bunch, and had all the good stuff. The rest of their team, Jim Washington, Keith Erickson, McCloy McLemore, which is a fun word, and Flynn Robinson were journeymen. Several of these guys I know were role players on the Bucks in the early 70s for their franchise, for their championship things. So, and there's a SI Vault article from before the season which talked about basically like how the Bulls kind of had a tough time getting into Chicago, and that 2 teams previously in Chicago had failed. They'd only sold 350 season tickets earlier, but they developed a strange charisma that fascinated local citizens, quite possibly as a result of Coach Johnny Kerr's relaxed but sparkling performances at press conferences. And by the end of the season, they were averaging 62 points a game. And then
not fans.
Yeah, this SI article continues is, as when Chicago put it, we still don't like pro basketball, we just like the Bulls. And then Kerr has a quote. They combined speed, defense, and hustle, saying, "We called it SDH. It's like LSD and affected us in the same way. It put us out of this world." So.
There you go.
Yeah, Johnny Kerr.
Johnny Red.
He was fun.
Johnny Red Kerr, yeah. Chicago has always had sort of, until Michael Jordan arrived, always kind of a love-hate relationship with pro basketball and the Bulls. Yeah, I mean, if you recall, people sort of the 80s prior to Jordan were not good either. I mean, they're like the Reggie Theus-led teams or whatever. They were okay, but nobody was going to see those. Like Chicago did not like basketball whatsoever. And then, obviously Jordan happened, and ever since then they've been, near the top of the league in attendance every year. From there on out. But yeah, it was dire times in Chicago, which is pretty interesting because you look at a major sort of franchise or a major, city with a franchise, and it hasn't always been good time. I mean, they've really, really struggled to bring people in before. I mean, prior to Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
Now it's okay.
Now it's fine. It has not been a problem. Even though they're cheap, as you know.
Right. That's how can we started. Yeah.
So next we have the 1978-1979 Nets, who were record-wise 37-45, which is not one of the worst of these, but a negative exactly 4 SRS. At this point, it was 12 playoff teams in a 22-team league. So the expansion had kind of caught up to, basically an appropriate amount of playoff teams for the size of the league at this point.
Yeah.
They lost to the 47-win Sixers 2-0. I think we forgot to mention previously that the Bulls actually did take a game from the Lakers in '68. So in that series, so they won 104-98.
Yeah, so go that Bulls.
Yeah.
So
ooh,
is that proof? I kind of put a little tidbit here. Is that proof that any team can win at least one game, given some amount of sample size?
How would Kentucky do against the '68 Lakers? Is my question.
Oh God. Well, now that they've lost this game, I immediately discredit it. Every side of that argument is they're just dumb. I hate that. Like first off, no, they would not have a chance. But I love how people now it's invalid because they lost to Wisconsin. Now officially it's invalid, and we should no longer discuss this because of that one game that they lost to Wisconsin. Now it proves without a shadow of a doubt that they wouldn't. Granted, it should have proved to you before that they shouldn't, but whatever. I'm not going to get into it. I love that debate every year. Every year, the best.
So the 79 Nets, they had Bernard King in his second year, and he performed very well for them. But off the court, he had a lot of issues, some arrests and some notoriety. He would be traded to the Jazz in the offseason where things would go very badly, and then he would eventually revive his career with the Warriors and, of course, the Knicks. This was Phil Jackson's second to last season. I don't know if you knew that he played for the Nets as well.
I did not, and I would not have ever. I don't think I've ever even seen a picture of it, or has he even never talked about it? Or was this just kind of like?
Yeah, it was like the last 2 years of his career. I mean,
so he just kind of.
Yeah, I mean, they were not good teams. I would not imagine that there would be much to talk about. I mean, maybe it's addressed in one. I haven't read all of his books, so yeah. He only played he played 59 games this season, and then his last year was his final year. He played 16 games. So didn't have much left in the tank, obviously. But he did okay coaching, reasonably well.
Yeah, not bad.
Yeah.
Maybe if he was on the Lakers at some point, they probably could bring their franchises together and get something going. But who knows?
Maybe the Nets also had future Wizards coach Eddie Jordan, famed shot blocker George Johnson, who played on the Warriors' '75 title team, and then Jan Van Bredlikoff, who was the son of the coach and a famous coach who coached the '69 Lakers and feuded with Wilt Chamberlain, putting him on the bench in the fourth quarter instead of playing him and losing to the Celtics. And he played 7 seasons with the Nets. The most interesting article I could kind of find related to this team was really focused mostly on their coach, Kevin Lowry, who was known for getting a lot of technicals. In fact, in his first two NBA seasons with the Nets, their overall record was 46-118, and he had 38 fewer wins than technical fouls. And he coached. He was the.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot.
That's a lot.
He was the replacement coach for on the 9-win 76ers, the 73 76ers, and then went to the Nets in the ABA and actually performed very well for a while. He had Dr. J, so that helped. And won a couple of championships there, and then the rest of his NBA career did not necessarily go so well. But he did coach. He coached the Bulls for a while, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Kevin, yes, he did. Yeah, I think in that early
maybe when he was a rookie, he coached the Bulls. He coached Jordan.
Well,
I believe. So.
Yeah, because he was that late. Yeah, no, he was the one. Yeah, and then he led way to Doug Collins, I believe.
Yeah, he coached 2 years for the Bulls. 84-85 was his last.
Okay, yeah.
He would have led to Collins,
season,
or was Stan Albeck also the coach for a year for the Bulls? I feel like that was a thing.
They had a bunch for a while, and
yeah, it was Stan Albeck, and then it was Doug Collins.
Oh, was that okay? So he was in between. Okay,
yeah. So Stan Albeck for 1 year. Anyway.
Oh, yeah, they're 85-86. Okay. Yeah. Did not know that. I always forget about him, but good run.
Speaking of the 85-86 Bulls, although we did not list them because they were not quite the worst of the 80s. They did finish 30-52, made the playoffs as an 8th seed, and despite having like almost -5 SRS. They were not quite as bad as the team that we chose, but it was very close. That it should be said that Jordan did miss all but like 12 games that year.
Yeah, correct. This is when he had his broken foot or whatever.
So he's a little bit skewed because of that, but still they were.
And unfortunately, that team Sans Jordan is wow. Yeah.
They were relying on really old.
Not many holdovers from the old title.
Yeah, they were relying on a very old,
Orlando
George
Woolridge.
Gervin and Orlando Woolridge. Yeah, it was not a good team. But
oh yeah, the really, even though he's only 33 at the time, I know I've seen like video or whatever. Man, George Gervin looks like he's playing in quicksand.
Yeah,
it's pretty sad.
Yeah, I mean, players didn't age that as well back then. So, generally, so the team that we did choose was because it should be mentioned that 84 the NBA expanded from 12 to 16 playoff teams, and it was only a 23 team league for a year. So from 84 to 88ish when they had that ratio, there were quite a few bad teams extra bad teams, I guess you could say, that made the playoffs during that time until they finally expanded in the late 80s, and it became again more balanced. It was kind of an interesting. I never really thought about expansion affecting the league that way. I mean, you usually think of it as sort of diluting the league, but in this case, it actually helps better teams make the playoffs in a way. You know, I guess they become better by beating up on weaker teams, so maybe it's still
right
overall, but at least like they perform better during the season. So it's I guess it's just an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you do tend to get the in those expansion years, like you said, you get the really, really good teams that will really be good. And we talk about, the 72 win bowls or whatever is a good example of that, of, where you can kind of beat up on the lower parts of the league. But yeah, it is pretty interesting how it affects the playoffs in this sense. But
yeah. So they, the 88 Spurs had 31 wins, a negative 5.02 SRS. And they had Alvin Robertson and Mike Mitchell, who had both been All-Stars. I think Robertson was like a 4-time All-Star, actually. And I'll get to him in a little bit, but he actually had a better reputation than I realized, at least early in his career. This was Mitchell's last season in the league, and Robertson would move on to the Bucks in a couple of seasons. So he didn't stick around. But I guess he was kind of like, Robertson was sort of the last, and Mitchell, I believe, were both the kind of the last holdovers from the early 80s Spurs teams that were actually pretty good and, challenged the Lakers a few times in the conference finals. And your favorite former Bull is on this team as well.
Yes. Dragon Tarlac. Oh, Dave Greenwood.
Dave Greenwood, yes. Who, of course, was famously number 2 to Magic Johnson in the 79 draft.
I still think the Bulls won that.
I mean,
it's arguable.
We have to let all the facts come in before we can decide.
Right. I mean, I don't know if they've really all done, I mean, their legacies I don't believe are completely complete at this point. So,
until they're no longer with us, unfortunately.
Exactly. We don't know what Magic's going to do.
Yeah,
I mean, let's hold
Dave
off.
Greenwood might make a remarkable comeback.
You never know.
It's possible,
Was he? Oh, he's 57. That's going to be tough.
Yeah.
But it's been done. I mean, it hasn't, but it has
done. Not been done.
I'll just say that because people say that.
How old was Bob Cousy when he came back? He was pretty old. He was like 48. He was
right.
He was not good either. So that's probably not a good example. But anyway, noted future flat top enthusiast Frank Bukowski of the 96 Sonics fame was on the team as well. He did not always have a flat top, by the way.
He didn't look. I guess I didn't realize he was like that old when he played on those Seattle teams, like the famous, Rodman.
He only actually played it one season for the Sonics.
I thought he was like a Sonic mainstay.
He played for the Bucks for a long time.
He was 36 years old in Seattle. Did he look 36 to you? I mean, he played like he was 36, but he didn't look.
Yeah, I don't know if I would have at that point. I mean, I was like 17 at that point. I don't know how well I would have judged like 36.
That's true. Maybe that was it. Oh, he played. He started with Seattle. That's where it got mixed.
Okay, there you go.
He was drafted by Seattle and then traded to. In 1 year he went from the Lakers to the Spurs. Okay, so that's it.
He went around a lot, yeah. So they also did have a wonderful collection of names of guys who barely played. Peter Guðmundsson from Iceland.
Nice job.
Thank you. John Sundvold, Kurt Nymphius, and Phil Sevenberg. They apparently are.
This is a strongman competition. I mean, they fill out the roster by going to a strongman competition. That's the only possible explanation for this. Phil
Sevenberger played 58 minutes. And Peter Guðmundsson played 1,000 minutes. So and Kurt Nymphius played 919. So they were contributors.
I'm looking up Phil and let's see what he looks like. Oh, he's 6'10", so he's just a freak. He was just a weird. Okay, all right.
So I can't imagine Iceland's had a lot of other NBA players. So
no, that's. We'll have to do a podcast on that.
On all of Iceland.
The famous Icelandic.
Did Bjork ever play in the NBA?
Maybe a rocket jock.
Yeah, it's possible. It's possible. I would love to see a Bjork and a rocket jock. That would be great. That would be fantastic. So I could not find, surprisingly, anything in the SI vault about this team. I know you're very surprised about that.
This famed San Antonio Spurs team.
But I did find from '86 there was it was sort of a profile on Alvin Robertson, who, and Doug Moe quoted as saying he is the next superstar guard in the NBA. And in his second year was voted to the West All-Star starting lineup. Which was he was really basically known for his defense. Honestly, I think he was probably known for his steals. I don't know if he was, how we would look at him defensively if someone studied the game tape or whatever. But back then, of course, steals equaled good defense. So he was, known for that. I'm pretty sure he's near the top of the list all time steals. I mean, in the top 10 or 15 or whatever for career. And his career was, he had a good career, but not like, the longevity of like a Jason Kidd or, somebody like that, or Stockton or whatever. But yeah, I just would not have thought of Alvin Robertson necessarily reaching that level. I mean, he was a 4-time All-Star, so he obviously was very good, but that at one time he was thought of as like, could be the next superstar is interesting.
Yeah. Absolutely. He unfortunately his post-playing career has not gone too well. I don't know if you saw that, but
I did not.
Yeah, he's had a little bit of problems.
Yeah.
Been arrested a few times, and then 2010 he was arrested for sexual assault of a child, trafficking an underage child for purposes of sex, and forcing sexual preference by a child. That's not. Yeah. So Alvin, we will not be doing an Alvin Robertson podcast.
He's got the Fast Eddie Johnson issue.
Yeah, unfortunately, he had a very interesting career though. It really good for a while, and then once he hit 30, like you said, guys didn't really age. I mean, he just fell on a cliff once he hit 30. Then had a bunch of injuries, back and knee problems, I believe, and then just was out of the league right away. But yeah, for a while there, I mean, 3 straight All-Star appearances and a pretty good overall player. But
he's from Ohio.
There you go. So Ohio's finest.
I mean, I don't know if we're so proud, but he's from Northeast Ohio. We don't really claim them. So
okay.
Yeah.
So that's okay,
it doesn't.
Is that actually true? Is that how you guys sort of? Well, I don't know the Ohio dichotomy.
That's kind of how I feel about it. I mean, I don't know if everybody feels that way, but I kind of feel like. I mean, I kind of feel like Cincinnati is basically Kentucky, and I just kind of feel like Cleveland is just sort of its own thing and isn't really part of the rest of us. I mean, I'm a little weird about Cleveland, but we won't get into that now. We'll talk. There'll be some, once Cleveland and Atlanta meet in the conference finals, there's going to be a whole lot of anti-Cleveland.
We'll do a joke. We'll get Joakim Noah on, and Joakim Noah and you can talk about how
I don't really get along with Joakim Noah either. Or I don't know if I don't know if I would get along with him, but. Maybe.
Probably not. No, he seems like a terrible person. But he hates Cleveland, so you guys will have
something to bond over. That's fair.
Exactly.
That's a good point. He probably is kind of a fun guy, but he's just he can be a little obnoxious in the court, I guess, sometimes.
Very obnoxious.
Yeah,
yes. That's coming from a Bulls
right.
Yeah.
So the next team is the 91-92 Heat, coached by Kevin Lowry again.
There it is.
Yeah. So I don't know. Does that say anything about him that he is able to get teams that maybe aren't actually all that good into the playoffs, like outperform what you would expect?
Yeah, I mean he's got a few in there. Yeah, I don't know. That's interesting. I didn't really think of it. Maybe his getting thrown out of so many games inspires his teams to like. Well, I mean, if he's willing to get thrown out, I guess we could try to be good. Or I don't know.
Here's my theory. Maybe he gets thrown out so much the team performs poorly when he's not out there because they don't have to play well because.
Oh, I see. So they would have been 50-win teams if he didn't.
Right. Exactly.
Get thrown out
so
many times. So you're going on the opposite side.
Yeah.
That
I mean, your theory is good too. I mean, I'm just.
That's a pretty big gap in time too. We're talking 78, 79, all the way to 90, 91, 92.
Yeah, I was
Lowry.
Toward the end of his coaching career, but yeah. By the way, the 88 Spurs were coached by Bob Weiss, and they were swept by the 62-win Lakers 3-0 in the first round. So, next we have the 92 Heat, as I mentioned. We're now at 2017 league, so close to what we are today, of course. And the early Heat stables of Grant Long, Glenn Rice, Ronnie Cycli, and Bimbo Coles are all on this team. And honestly, like that group of guys was around for together for 5 or 6 years. It's kind of interesting to see how long those guys all kind of played for the Heat.
Yeah, the Heat had a nice little core for a long, long time that we kind of forget. Well, I mean, obviously they weren't like a great team or a historic team, but yeah, you look at this and 91, 92, a lot of those guys were hanging around until all the way through the mid 90s. A lot of them.
Yeah.
I mean, most of them even do. I mean, some of them for it seemed like 10 years almost.
Yeah,
like a Ronnie Cycli or whatever.
I mean,
it seems like he was
Grant
always
Long and
on
Glenn
that
Rice
team.
played into the early 2000s for sure.
Yeah, Glenn Rice until he got traded to the Hornets, right?
Yeah,
and that was
he actually got traded to the Hornets like in '95 or so. So he didn't stick around quite as long as the other guys, but he was in the league for a long time, obviously. So and then Steve Smith was a rookie on this team, and Sherman Douglas was traded early in the season for Brian Shaw, and they were. They did not do well in the playoffs. They were swept by the 67-win Bulls team, 3 games to the second. This is the second Bulls championship team, the best performing of those 3 teams.
Yeah, and probably one of probably their best team, I would say. Oh, the 72 team is up there, but I think this team is better than that.
Yeah, that's kind of a hard because I think this is probably a better Jordan, even though like he got crafty in his old age and was
right. But this is like I'm gonna dunk on you. I'm gonna do whatever I want on the court.
He could do everything at this point. Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, and they lost by a combined 54 points, including a 30-point game 2 loss. So I guess the other 2 games weren't so bad, but and there is a I couldn't find an SI Vault article, but I did find a article in the LA Times about the trade. And basically saying that the Brian Shaw's problem was that he was really self-conscious about playing basketball rather than just going out and doing it. It was as if a fine dancer suddenly became self-conscious and started looking at his feet. So that was apparently the psychological profile for Brian Shaw.
Okay,
I don't know if that feeds into how he was as a coach at all.
I was gonna say, did he lose confidence? I think he did lose confidence. Remember, because then he got really weird at like the middle of this year.
Yeah,
he had his thing, but then he started doing a bunch of weird stuff and like with books and like, how do I reach these millennials and like.
I mean, he was rapping and
he got really weird. Yeah, so I guess that is true.
I mean, he kind of did some of the Phil Jackson stuff, where like kind of playing a few of the games in the media, and the books is definitely a Phil Jackson thing. So. Yeah, I don't know. It didn't work out well for him in Denver. Maybe he'll bounce back, and maybe just was a bad fit all along. Denver kind of sounds like a mess, like all around. So
yeah, that's
hard to completely judge him for that. Although he didn't sound like he helped that much.
No, and if he's a good assistant, that's fine too.
Yeah,
nothing wrong with being a lifetime really good assistant.
That's true.
But I mean, the paychecks might. But I mean, Brian, he doesn't need it. So that I know of. I'm not sure. I don't know. But I'm assuming he doesn't need it. But
I mean, when I committed identity theft against him,
I found out his offshore accounts. I mean, he's got a lot of offshore accounts, but everything that's here is looking pretty good.
So the good news is that since then the negative SRSs for teams in the playoffs have not been significantly above 1. It's because of expansion and and all of that. The most of the teams making the playoffs, have there aren't really awful teams making it with really awful records or really awful SRSs until maybe perhaps this year. And now it's time for my favorite team of all of this, as a big Atlanta Hawks fan living in Atlanta at the time, is the 2007-2008 Hawks, who were won 37 games and had a negative 2.23 SRS. This was their first playoff appearance since '99, I believe. And they had Joe Johnson, I believe 8-time All-Star, maybe 7-time All-Star Joe Johnson. A lot of All-Star times Joe Johnson. Josh Smith, Marvin Williams, Josh Childress, and Zaza Pachulia. Also had Al Horford as a rookie, and Mike Bibby had come over at the trade deadline.
It's a great team.
Yeah,
it's a great team. I don't care what anybody says. It's great.
Right.
I mean, it was great in NBA. I remember playing as them in the NBA 2K games because they were great. I mean, everybody on that court could score. So, and defense doesn't matter. So it's
this core of guys,
it's not bad.
It ended up becoming, I do feel like people sort of like the Hawks kind of became like a shorthand for like okay but not good enough in kind of the late 2000s. Just because, kind of their ceiling wasn't great with Joe Johnson. Mm-hmm. They were definitely not a finals contender. They might have snuck into like an Eastern Conference Finals and if they'd gotten lucky. But, they've made the playoffs every year that Al Horford's been there. Right. I believe 8 years. So, I'll take that. That's not too bad. And obviously this year has been fantastic. Not really related to this team at all, with the exception of Horford being there, but it's fun. So they, probably had the best playoff run of any of these teams other than the Lakers, who actually did win a series. But they took the 66-win Celtics team to 7 games. The Celtics, who were, historically a historically great regular season team, had almost a 9.3 SRS. Really great. Probably the best team that we've had since until the Warriors this year. In recent years. So. Even though they basically won 3 very close games at home and lost decisively in the games they lost. But I went to Game 3 of this series, and it was really, really, really exciting. It was my first playoff game, and I had been watching the Hawks for 4 or 5 years since the famous 2004-2005 season that I followed very closely. And Zaza got in Garnett's face, and that was Game 4. Game 3, Joe Johnson had a big comeback, and Josh Smith played really well. This is when everyone was excited about Josh Smith before the dark times that followed, and it was great, So it was a lot of.
And this is the title Celtics team, in case people are
yes.
Don't know that you're a fan. So this is the Hawks took that team. They were on the brink of completely eliminating that and making the Big 3 experiment a total miserable failure. And
we won't get into what happened in Game 7, the margin of victory there for Game 7. We're not going to talk.
No, they had the 6 games and they were even, and then then it's a coin flip. The Game 7's always a coin flip, right?
It was definitely a coin flip. Yeah. So this is a historically great Celtics, one season Celtics.
It was 99-65, people.
We weren't going to mention that, Rich.
I said that low. I know. I didn't know you heard that. Did you hear that,
Rich?
I thought I said it low enough. You're like a certain, like a dog. You're like the pitch is below a certain level or above. I didn't know you could hear that. Okay.
Oh, Rich.
I apologize, but
that's not very nice. Anyway, so I did find there was a good SI article in the following season where the Hawks were playing well, and for some reason Mike Bibby was given a great deal of credit for them playing well, which I don't quite remember it being that way. But okay, he was pretty good for a while. He said that his goal had been always to play 20 years in the NBA or through the 2018-19 season, which imagine that. Imagine Mike Bibby still being in the league. And
because considering what year was that where the corpse of Mike Bibby was on the New York Knicks, and he was just so awful.
That was 3 years after. That was
that's what I mean. How many years ago was that?
That was just 3 years ago. Yeah. So.
It was 11-12, and that Mike Bibby was just awful. That was so horrendous.
Anyway, the remark was overheard by Zaza Pachulia, who was 24 at the time, and then Zaza said 20 years, and then Bibby says, "You don't think I can make it?" And Pachulia said, "I hope you do. I want to play the rest of my career with you. You're the best point guard I've ever played with." Now,
and so they did.
That might be a nice thing to. First of all, that might actually still be true. I'm not sure. I guess Brandon Knight was pretty good this year, so I'm not sure that Zaza Pachulia has still played with a better point guard. Jeff Teague wasn't really very good when Zaza was there, and the point guards that came before Bibby were terrible. So I will grant him that, but either way, Zaza seems like a nice guy. I met Zaza once in person. It was very nice. Yeah, I met him at a restaurant in Atlanta. It was after the first game I ever watched the Hawks win. So it was good. I also
trying to very quickly go through all of Zaza Pachulia's career point guards, and there's a pretty good chance Bibby is the one.
Yeah. So at least career wise, I would say so far that Bibby is at the best career of any point guard that.
Teague. It remains to be seen about Jeff Teague, right. But the Milwaukee, his teams were Mo Williams,
maybe Brandon Knight, right? So.
Is the early Milwaukee teams, then the Atlanta, obviously, and his rookie year with Orlando was like the Tyronn Lue starting point guard.
There you go. And he played with Tyronn Lue in Atlanta too. So
yes, exactly. So he's right.
Yeah,
and they did play the rest of their careers together. So that's pretty cool how that worked out.
Zaza and Mike together,
pretty sweet.
Together forever.
They're still tearing up the league
forever,
from what I assume.
Yeah.
I don't watch the NBA anymore, so I have no idea. I'm assuming that they're still doing it.
Yeah. So now we're down to this year. And we have about 6 games to go for most teams. The teams battling for the 7th and 8th slot are the Nets, the Celtics, the Pacers, the Heat, and ostensibly the Hornets, although they may be too far back behind. But the Nets are currently in the best position to make the playoffs, but they have a negative 3.56 differential, which I believe would be the worst since that Spurs team in '88.
Yeah.
The Heat has negative.
Oh, the Heat, the 91-92 Heat are negative 3.95.
Oh,
so
okay,
they'd be just below,
right.
but in between them.
You're right. Thank you. The Heat are a negative 2.99. The Hornets are negative 2.57. The Pacers are actually only a negative 0.49. So they're sitting pretty. You know, they're gold by these standards, and the Celtics are negative 0.137. So we do have a chance, especially if the Nets and the Heat make it, for two historically bad playoff teams to make it in. So
we have a funny thing with the Eastern Conference as well. Is there's so few teams with positive SRS numbers. Like I would have to really go back and do like a real big research on this to see. But you have the Atlanta Hawks are positive, Cleveland Cavaliers obviously positive, Toronto Raptors positive, Chicago Bulls, Wizards, and then that's it.
Yep.
Everybody else
and the Wizards are barely
negative.
the Wizards are not,
and like Wizards are on the cusp.
Yeah.
Like they could very very easily get to negative as well.
Yeah.
But
so
that's horrifying. Like,
that's pretty great. Which, by the way, there are only 4 teams with the negative SRS in out west. Like
right.
the Jazz, who are 35 and 52, have a better SRS than the 44 win Wizards. So
yeah, it's Eastern Conference.
Yeah.
One day they'll get better.
Yeah,
but
I don't know. Or
when.
maybe they'll just do a 1 through 16 in the playoffs, and
that might be a good idea. Yeah, we might. I don't know if we reached critical mass with that. I mean, it's been talked about pretty much my entire adult. It's been talked about, but we're getting there where it's kind of like, I mean, this year especially, there's a few teams that I would like to see.
I'm all for it. I don't see a big problem with it. I mean, there's a few things that would be issues, but the travel and maybe. I don't know, maybe rivalry stuff, although I kind of think that's a little bit overblown. I mean, what real big rivalries do we have at this point anyway? But, anything else, Rich?
That's it. Yeah, that was a very bad podcast.
All right.
I think
we
did a good job of representing the worst.
Hopefully we released mediocre.
Yeah.
So everyone can check us out at thepodiumgame.com. We are part of the Hardwood Paroxysm Basketball Podcast Network, which you can find on iTunes. We would love it if you left us a rating and review to let us know, to rate not only us, but all the rest of the great shows on the HP network that you can find at thepodiumgame.com. And you can find us on Twitter at Over and Back NBA, Facebook at the same. And we also have a website, Over and Back NBA.com, that we keep promise to update, and eventually someday will.
I promise.
Did I forget anything, Rich?
I believe that's it. Facebook as well.
Facebook, yeah.
If that's your thing.
If you're on Facebook, yeah. And we'd love it to if you tweeted at us and let us know if you loved or hated or somewhere in between our show or wanted to discuss a point that we brought up. We love discussing things on Twitter.
Or requests. If you want us to request a topic,
yeah.
you request a topic, we will be glad to talk about it. It's not the first time we've done it, and we're always kind of looking for new ideas. We have a bunch of ideas, but if there's something that you want to hear and want to listen to, let us know.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we could spend a lot of time on it or a little bit of time on it, depending on what it is. But absolutely, we aim to please. So
absolutely.
All right. Thanks everyone for checking us out, and we'll be back again soon.